Welcome back, everybody. My name is David Whitmore. The other voice you will hear is Joseph Whitmore. This is a podcast about Isabella and her husband, Ferdinand. A couple disclosures up front. We're not real historians, we're not real comedians. This is an unrehearsed conversation, but I think you're going to enjoy it. So, just to get started with Ferdinand and Isabella, everybody knows them from school. They were the ones that funded Columbus, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but we won't do a whole episode here on Columbus. But wanted to talk about going a step back. So this is Spain, or the Iberia Peninsula, as it were, and Isabella, she really is a warrior queen. And the related characters in her life shaped the world as we know it today. So she was born in 1451. She died in 1504. She was from the area in Spain known as Castile. And I'm going to let you take it from here, but I just wanted to say that going back where we are from, so the fall of the Roman Empire, then the oh my God, what? Not the Celts, the Gauls. That area was conquered by the Visigoths, and the Visigoths were in control for probably 500 years or so till around 1000. And after that, the Muslims or the Moors from North Africa came up, and they, pretty much encroached all the way across Spain. And it wasn't until probably, I don't know, 12 or 1300s, there was a war, and the War of Peters and all that, and
The
the
War of the Peters.
the War of the
Yeah.
Peters, and Christians began to reconquer the Iberian Peninsula and start kicking the Muslims out. And at this point in time, in 1450s, the Muslims are in one area in the south of Spain called Granada. So, what's
Yeah,
going
that's
on
pretty
with
much it. That's a little bit of the backstory.
that's the
Yeah.
backstory, but we got to talk about her, Isabella, when she marries Ferdinand, and they have a um, a locked up marital arrangement. She was taking bids on her marriage. They were looking at England. They were looking at Portugal. She finally settled with Ferdinand, and he was up in Aragon, I believe. But she made damn sure that her land was hers. And the great thing about Ferdinand, he was just like, yeah, that's fine.
It's sort of like with Eleanor, right? I mean,
Exactly.
she did that same thing with, who is it, Louis the Seventh or Louis the Sixth or something, where he said, "Yeah, I can be Lord of Aquitaine, but only as long as I'm married to you." And as soon as that's done, so it goes back to Eleanor, and that's why they ended up going to Henry the Fourth or something. Um, so yeah, there is that. So she made
So they get
she was a
married.
hands-on type of person. And remember when she took over as this Catholic queen, she had to go to war against her niece, right? She first had to kill her niece. Um,
Who's this?
be-
Isabella had to kill her niece?
yeah, because her brother was King Henry, right? And he had a daughter.
Oh, that's
Who had
right. That's right. So
Yeah, he
that's
had a
right. So
daughter.
that
So
was
the
her
daughter,
competition.
and in Spain, daughters can become kings or queens. They can inherit the power, right?
Right.
So his daughter was the
Descendant.
direct line to the throne. But apparently, her brother, everybody kind of knew that Henry could not mate with the female. He could only mate with other men. So nobody believed that this daughter of his was his, right? So
What?
when um, Isabella goes, well, no, that's not your true kid, because we all know that you can't create kids, right? And so she had a big war to overthrow her niece. one of the reasons why she wanted Fernando, right? So Isabella is not a good person.
I know. We're going to get to that because we
Yeah.
learn in history how great she is, and we can talk about how she's not, or in your opinion, she's not. And she did do terrible things. So we got to talk about the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians. All three of those religions were on the Iberian Peninsula, and at one point or another, they were kind of all there, you know, not peacefully, but they were lived side by side. And as the Christian kings began to, move south and kick the Muslims out, the Jews were not in any better shape. In fact, they got rid of the Jews before before Granada was finally surrendered. The Jews had a choice to make. They could convert to Christianity, they could be killed, or they could leave. And most of them converted to Christianity. They're like, sure, whatever. Um, but the Muslims all got pushed down to Granada, and the Christians were. And I think what we need to appreciate maybe is that Isabella was super religious zealot, and her.
Very, very, very controlling personality. She
eh,
didn't like this. I mean, yeah, before Isabella, it was called the land of the three religions, where there was sort of this pluralism going on, where there was a certain level of tolerance. Or especially with the Muslims at that time, that was during their Renaissance, right? That was the Renaissance period of Islamic Spain,
Yeah.
and they were very liberal. They were very liberal, but like they actually, you could be a Christian or a Jew within the Islamic Empire as long as you paid a tax, right? Which is, like, well, that's kind of, but at least they're not killing you, right? And a lot of like persecuted Christians went to Islamic lands just so, I'll pay the tax, but I can be a Christian and not be killed by other Christians.
Yeah,
Um,
and we had talked about that before. But well, I think what's interesting to point out is that these Moors is really the best word. They are not the same Muslims as the Ottoman Turks. Different people. In fact, like you said, they were kind of laid back. And when they did need help from their North African people, they were kind of hesitant because those guys are fanatics, And they were
Yeah,
kind of like,
so it's sort of like a liberal Episcopalian, right? Going to some radical fundamentalists to get help, and they didn't know what was worse, right? Going all fundamentalist with their help from the Berbers from North Africa, or trying to deal with Isabella. They were really stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Or
that's right.
from both sides.
That's
They were
right.
just
And I
wanting
think
to get them out of here.
so.
Actually, it was a little bit unfair, right? Because when I think Fernando, I keep saying Fernando, what's his name?
Ferdinand.
Ferdinand. I think he was the more liberal. He didn't really care. He wasn't religious. When he went and took over Granada, they didn't really have a lot of wars, right? Because the poor the poor Islamic Empire, they weren't much into fighting at that point. But they says, okay, we're out of here, but we'll sign this record to say you just leave us alone, right? You can take over the country, but let us go ahead and practice our religion, practice our business, and initially that was true, right? They set up the first bishop to go into Granada, tried to convert him, but only on a rational basis. But
Well, I think you might be getting ahead of the
later,
story here for.
and a fanatic came in and kicked him out.
Right. But wasn't. So, from what I understand, the timeline goes something like this. The It's in the 1490s, and by the way, Columbus is now on their salary. They paid Columbus a salary to hang around and pester them about his plan to the New World. And interestingly enough, excuse me, when he struck out with the Portuguese were entertaining multiple offers of doing the same thing. So, but Isabella and Ferdinand were like, you know what, this Columbus guy, he's got something. Put him on ice because we're not ready. We're fighting a war. Excuse me. And they paid him a salary so he could hang around and pester him. But anyway, so they're busy, and she's really bent on a crusade because it's her ancestral right, and she's crazy religious, and she's like thinking about this ways to conquer
Yeah,
Granada,
yeah,
and then
yeah. What was really funny when Fernando, Fernando, I'm just gonna call him that. When Fernando was having a problem with the with some type of siege and it wasn't going well, he called Isabella to come down
yeah,
and show up outside the wall, and just her presence scared the shit out of people, and they go, okay, we give up. We can't take it against Isabella, man. That's too much.
she was really,
Fernando goes, okay, you can go back.
yeah. See, in they were celebrities in their own day. They were so damn popular and stuff. Could you imagine like a celebrity, you know, king and queen today, or two presidents getting married and stuff? And they were very very popular. But what what I was going to say is that she's bent on this crusaded minded thing, and she has it served up to her. So
Yeah, well,
the
well,
the
well, well, like I say,
Muslims,
consider, was she that popular when she was in a war with her niece, right? Who was the true? I mean, there was a war that lasted like 5 or 6 years where she was trying to overthrow her niece. When she did overthrow her niece, and I mean, she probably had a lot of resentment. I mean, half of probably Castile was against her, uh, and I think she needed the crusade in order to divert. She was like some people, right? I mean, a diversion, right? He says, "Oh, forget about your niece, man. Let's go take Granada. Let's have a crusade." And I think that was part of her reason, part of her need to distract the population to go kill Muslims instead of, because she just got through killing her Catholic niece. Says, "Whoa, let's do a little sleight of hand here." So she was a very good politician,
yeah.
very good.
But
She was
there were some like the story you just told, when she shows up, the the other side just freaking folds. But anyway, I want to tell the story about Zara. This is the funny
I
story.
don't know that.
God, I have the coronavirus. Okay, so this is a mountain kingdom. It's on the border in
Oh
of
my
the
God.
Christian land and the Muslim land. It's right there on the border, and it's this impenetrable mountain fortress. And it's the last Christian fortress before Muslim Granada. And nobody can take it because it's on this high mountain. Okay, so one night when it's raining, a bunch of Moors just scale up the mountain, climb over the wall, wipe out the whole fortress, and take it in like 3 hours. And it was like, what the whoa! This was never supposed to happen, and that gave
It was probably the Berbers, because I don't think the Shah, whatever they had, would have that much energy in them. He probably
he
hired
probably
some
hired some
Berbers.
people, but they scaled this wall, and it was all crazy. They were like mountain climbing. I think it was raining or something, and they get there, and it's just boom. They take over the fortress, and that is the perfect excuse, of course, for Isabella to rage her campaign to take to get rid of the Moors, to get rid of the Muslims out of Spain. And the thing is, I know there's a lot of battles, and it goes on and on and on, and blah 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 blah. And Granada is the last one, and they don't have to destroy it because the Muslims surrender, and they gave him the choice, and the choice was that the guy was leaving, and Isabella cried because it was like they had been there for centuries. Excuse me. And they were finally leaving now. And that is such a great picture because it was her idea to kick him out, but when they're finally leaving and the Christians are going to have Granada, she weeps. And it's the same thing, coincidentally, that the Philippine natives did after the Spanish. They finally got rid of the Spanish and they surrendered, and then they honored them with a parade right out. They're like, oh, hey, you guys have been here for like hundreds of years. You built um, our cities and stuff. Appreciate you. So yeah,
Okay. No, 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 get out. Right. Yeah,
so that was kind of weird because maybe she wasn't. Maybe she. You can look at her as a genocidal warrior queen because she got rid of all the Jews and the Muslims.
and
I,
she started the Inquisition. Don't
oh
forget
Lord.
that. The Spanish Inquisition was all Isabella. I mean, get reported to her. I mean, this is. I mean, actually, when I was in college, I was taking a course in biblical Hebrew from
Of
from
course you
from a
were.
from a Jewish rabbi, right? And I don't know why, for some reason, we were talking, and I brought up Ferdinand and Isabella, right? And I did at that time. All I had was a high school knowledge of Ferdinand and Isabella about sponsoring Columbus, so I thought that was a good thing. And he got pissed off. He said, "Those fucking assholes! Don't even talk about them in front of me." Right? And I go, why Ferdinand and Isabella? Right? They're Columbus, right? So then I realized, once I looked into it, I go, yeah, he has a pretty good reason for being pissed off, right? I mean, the Inquisition was made specifically against the Jews who converted to Christianity, for God's sake. I mean, because they converted, but then they go, well, you didn't really convert. You just converted because you wanted to stay in Spain and keep your gold. And they're going, well, yeah, yeah, of course, right? And they go, well, no, that's not good enough. We're gonna torture you and find out you're not really good Christians, and then we're gonna kill you and take your gold anyways.
Well, there you go. But again, it
Yeah,
was the 15th
there you go.
century.
Yeah,
It was the end of the 15th century. So
yeah.
yeah, so they did some bad things, but the
They did
the
some bad things.
there was there okay, so they committed genocide. However, the Columbian Exchange, you know, it changed the
Yeah,
world as we lived.
what they did to the Jews and the Islamic people and Muslims was just practice, right?
Right.
That was nothing. Wait till we get a whole continent to destroy instead
Wow,
of
I
like
know.
people
And the
are
problem there was they
Spain.
gave them the diseases, multiple diseases all at the same time. Here, have smallpox, have typhoid, have tuberculosis, have the common cold, which might kill you. Have all of them. Yeah, so that was bad.
It's like the Whitman sampler of diseases, right?
Well, I don't know. I guess you're right. I guess they were not outstanding people. Um, in a way, they helped Christianity kind of win because it could have gone either way in a way because um, the Muslim culture was expanding a lot.
Yeah,
Constantinople had fallen, and they were encroaching everywhere, even like a skirmish onto the into Italy. So this was the Christians' first good win. It wasn't against the Ottoman Turks, but at least it was against Muslims. So in that in that respect, they may have kind of, and then with her grandson Charles V, this, and they married into the Habsburg, and that spread. If you think about it, all the way from the steppes to Russia, all the way to North and South America. That's got to be the biggest empire ever on the planet, and it was due
yeah,
to
maybe except the Mongols, but yeah, with Charles V, uh, yeah, he had all the New World, plus he had the Holy Roman Empire, plus he had the Spanish Empire. It was pretty amazing, and he's the one who went. I mean, yeah, people like the time of Isabella and Fernando. That was about the time that the Muslims had conquered Byzantium, right? Um,
Yeah.
so
Constantinople fell in
yeah,
1491, you said.
Constantinople. Yeah, it's when Constantinople fell to the Muslims, and the Muslims were going up and attacking Hungary. So it was sort of their reply, right? Maybe you could see why they're pissed off. Yeah,
But just think what her grandson had on his plate. He was fighting a
oh yeah.
war with the
One thing
Pope, with
we
France.
have to say though first
Oh,
that we're not Jewish, Muslims, or Christians, so we have no dogs in this fight, right? We're just like this is our observations,
that's
right?
right. But I think,
Nothing against anybody,
of course,
except sometimes you don't like these people.
that's true. You had mentioned something because Charles V and all that with that time with Henry VIII and Francis and Solomon or Saladin, whatever.
Oliver the Magnificent, yeah,
Solomon the
yeah.
Magnificent.
But
All that was
that's
her grandson, but you
that's
said that
coming up. They haven't happened yet in this.
they haven't happened yet. But you said so the generation between that was Catherine of Aragon and some famous people. You had mentioned that one of the daughters was named Luna Loco and she was crazy. I couldn't find anything about her.
Oh, that's what's sad. This is what really pisses me off about Isabella. I mean, she was a cruel, merciless woman. She acted so. Her daughter was Joanna, right? And Joanna actually was the mother of Charles V.
Okay.
Carlos Quinto, right? And Isabella had her physically tortured. She tortured her own kid, and then she locked her up because Joanna wasn't religious enough. She didn't want to go to church. And so Isabella had her tortured, where she was strung up by her thumbs off the floor until she was going to go to church. And Joanna's going, well, shit, I don't believe this shit. Right? And she goes, well, this is the new Spain. There's only one friggin' religion, and this is it. Catholicism is it. And if you're not a Catholic, then you can't be here, right? And so they called her insane, mainly because she didn't want to become religious, and they left her in jail, even when she married Maximilian of the Holy Roman Empire and had Charles. So yes, she died in prison, and Isabella put her there. So she not only killed her niece, she tortured and imprisoned her own daughter because she wasn't religious enough. I mean, what kind of asshole do you have to be?
I think
how
that
controlling do you have to be with your kids?
right.
You know,
So it's fifth. Yeah.
so why don't they teach that in school? Huh?
Well, I think they try to. I think they try to de-emphasize that because you could say the same thing about Cleopatra. She killed her little brother.
That's wow. The little brother was a dick.
Right.
But
But anyway,
that's no excuse.
so I wanted to mention one thing about that I thought was funny just because of the names, and then we're coming up on 30 minutes here. But so before Isabel and Ferdinand get married, actually, I guess it's a long time before, but there was that war. And at one point, Portugal was actually part of all this. But there was a war of two Peters. And the funny thing was, one Peter was called the Cruel, and the other Peter was called something like the Contemplative or something. Wasn't it? It was like Peter the Calm and Peter the Cruel. And
And Peter the Cruel got his friends was like Peter the Black and
the Black Prince. See, there's a whole story there that I don't know. But the name is so
the
funny.
Black Prince and the
But the end result, I guess, was that Portugal was a separate country. The kingdoms of Aragon, Castile, and whatever, they were kind of more solidified after that. Because that was back in like 13 something. But, God, it's such an interesting thing if you think about the history of that area. First, it starts
I
out
mean,
with.
if you go to Spain now, I mean, what was there was like, well, there's Portugal is still separate, but there's Castile, there's Navarone, and there was Catalonia, and there was
And they're still really
Aragon.
distinct to this
Yeah, you
day.
go there now, they're still like, well, we're not Spanish. I go, well, yeah, you are. You're living in. No, no, we're like
Or
Saxons.
Castilian or something.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. We're not Castilian, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. So it still is influenced today. That's what I'm saying. I said early on. The characters that are in her sphere of influence totally shape the world um, that we know today. And it's so weird if you think about some of the things that were happening in like the areas of Hungary when the Muslims were encroaching on the Christian kingdoms there, and there was little areas that were Muslim and little areas that were Christian, and that there was a lot of mixed match all the way down to like present day Bosnia and stuff, and that area erupted like just like a decade ago,
Yeah.
right? The Balkans,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
those
Balkanized.
there still was to this day separate enclaves of these minority groups that had always lived together, but then at whatever drop of a hat, it's time to kill each other. It's so weird,
That was that after that was the beginning of World War One.
right?
With the Duke of what's his name? The Duke of.
It was another Ferdinand, I think.
Yeah.
You have trouble with that Ferdinand name
Got
today.
shot and his wife by some Serbian. I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy.
So
Get over it already. It's that's why I think so. Isabella did a lot, but I don't think any of it was for the good, right?
well, in her mind, of course it was. She wasn't. She didn't like wake up.
Renaissance because of her, right?
Spain
I mean-
didn't have the Renaissance because
I
of her.
mean, you ever hear
Yeah.
about the Spanish Renaissance? I mean, no, she was too friggin' controlling.
Yeah.
Right? All they got was the Jesuits. They're like, good linguistics, but I don't know if I trade the Jesuits for the Renaissance.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Spain suffered from bad decisions, between
that's a
World
pretty
War
bad-
One and World War Two. With
Yeah.
so anyway, they had a tough time. But the crazy thing was with their conquest in the New World, the amount of silver that they were pulling out of from the Incas was just crazy. So
Did you
it
realize
it
You know
fueled.
what's funny? During that time, this is because they don't understand economic theory, right? They just think it's like printing money, right? All they were doing was printing money, only in the form of gold, right? They went bankrupt 15 times during their period of exporting all the gold from the Incas and the Aztecs. It's like they think, oh, here's all this gold, everybody's rich, but they're not making anything. Right? So all they did was cause massive inflation, and they used their money to create wars and to buy silk and tea from China. So there's all that silver and gold never stayed in Spain; it all ended up in China, the
Right.
Vatican. So if you go to the Vatican and see all these gold-tilted churches, that was based upon the slavery and the exploitation of American, and no one's giving it back. No one's saying they're sorry.
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. There was yeah, it was. So that's the other thing. The natives in the New World were easy to conquer because they were dying of disease. So it was just an awful thing. But anyway, it is where we are today, and we're still living with it.
We are still living with it. Yeah.
But anyway, so that's Isabella. We didn't. I like that we kind of discounted Ferdinand. He was just like the husband. We keep our narrative on the women, Isabella. So I don't know who we're gonna do Oh, here, wait, I have one more thing, and then we're over 30 minutes. We got to end this. The Muslim culture at the time of Ferdinand and Isabella was probably at its height, but one big problem it had, and one problem that Isabella clearly was cognizant of, there was no place for women in the Muslim. There was never Soleimana the Magnificent. There was never.
As opposed to Isabella, yeah.
So yeah, so that was. I think that is one demerit and a lot of positives that the Muslim culture had at that time. You know, women had no power in the Christian lands. Women did. That was
Well, in
obvious.
Spain they did. Yeah, when I guess, yeah, if you look at France with
Well, at least there
uh,
was an off chance
Eleanor,
that they
yeah,
could
yeah,
inherit, but there was no
yeah.
off chance that there could be a. What do you call the ruler of the Ottoman Turks? He called himself
The Sultan or
the
what?
Sultan. There was never gonna be a female Sultan.
The Sultana.
You know what? The highest female in the Muslim was probably like the spiritualist that would give them like guidance on the stars and stuff. They liked those women. They would listen to them.
Yeah. I actually have no idea. I know very, very little about. That's an interesting subject, though. I
So
can't think of
so that's why Catherine.
any.
I mean, that's why Isabella she was just a woman's liber. That's all. But she had to commit genocide on the way. But that was her primary. Those women's libers, you got to watch out. Trying to end on a humorous note. All right, stay tuned.
I like the Eleanors of Aquitaines more than I do the Isabellas. But to give her creed, she was a very strong ruler. And there's been worse male rulers.
For sure.
Henry VIII for one, right? I mean, so.
Well, he might not have actually.
President come to mind, right?
Henry
So
VIII might not have caused as much death. But anyway, so stay tuned for next week. We're going to do somebody that's awesome. I'm not sure exactly who that is. You can find us also on www.patreon.com/Witta. And thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.